Hi there, this is Mckenna Canty. I'm a senior at UMass Amherst and an intern with the New Music Alliance, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping the careers of Western New England artists who write original music. You're about to hear my interview with Dave Stern, the lead singer and guitarist for The Usual. Hey there, Dave. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
So, the song Fat Dracula's Death March, which many Radio Music Hour listeners would have just heard and seen the video, it kind of tells the story of the well-known character Dracula, and he's making a movie in classic Hollywood. I was wondering if you could tell me about your songwriting process for the song and what inspired you to write it.
Oh, I can absolutely tell you about that.
Great.
And this may take up more than 15 minutes, but anyway.
That's okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the Stephen King novel Pet Sematary. All right. Well, they made it into a movie, and it was the original. It was a halfway decent movie, and then they made a sequel, Pet Sematary 2. And the conceit of Pet Sematary is that there's this place where if you bury your pets, they come back to life. There's a scene that takes place during Halloween where like these kids are dressed up. One of the kids is dressed up as Dracula, and he's described as a fat Dracula. And I thought, oh man, that is a great image, fat Dracula. And I got to thinking, what would the life of like a fat Dracula be like? Somebody who had been sort of a little bit past his prime and, still want to keep going. And that turned out to mirror very closely, sadly, Bela Lugosi's life. The guy who played Dracula. He was never really able to get past being cast as Count Dracula. And so that, in a nutshell, is the genesis of a lot of the
That's awesome. I love how you can kind of combine inspiration from so many different places, and you can make it into like another storyline of its own. That's awesome.
Well, and I think that certainly has some relevance. I think to everybody. Everybody's like, man, I want another shot at trust me, I can do this. And actually, the one of the character's name, Mr. Kimmer, comes from my son was in a play called True West, which is a Sam Shepard play. It's basically about two brothers who are both writers and both trying to get a movie made through a Hollywood producer who happens to be named Mr. Kimmer. And I just, that just kind of came out too, Kimmer and Winter just seem to rhyme.
That's awesome. So. What a great illusion. That's so cool. Wondering if you could maybe tell me a little bit about the music video, because it seems like you take clips from a lot of different movies. That must have been a really long process to just find all the ones, put them together.
I originally, we thought it would be pretty straightforward to just find clips, but then a little education can be a dangerous thing. And I just realized that you cannot actually just take, unlike pictures, movies, you can't use any of the footage, without getting permission. And I certainly wasn't going to. So I had to use a lot of public domain movies. The copyright on Plan 9 from Outer Space happened to be, there was a problem with the registration. And that's true with all those, all the clips from actual movies that are in there are public domain. And the original footage is myself and the guys in the band. There's not much of us in there because, it's a freaking pandemic. How can we do a video? And so we had to cobble all that together and, got people in as best we could. I was sorry, I think one of the things that I'm really, when I wrote the song, it was kind of a rock song. And Doug Plavin, the drummer, came in and said, no, man, it should have this kind of groove. And, then him and Mark Navu, the bass player, we rehearsed it a couple times, we recorded it, and then we had a gig at Luthier's, like, this is, over a year ago. And Jim Armenti from the Lonesome Brothers happened to be on the bill right before us, just playing solo. And I know Jim. I took lessons from Jim for a while. And I also knew that he played clarinet, and the feel that Doug had given it was kind of like an Eastern European feel. So I was like, Jim, you're going to be there. Would you mind jumping up and playing clarinet with us that night? And he did. And that was so good that I was like,
it fits so well in the song, yeah.
Yeah. And then we were also like, we should have an accordion. And Chris Haynes, who's a friend of all of ours, he's a fantastic accordion player. He came by and put accordion down. And then Forbes Library. Here's something I'd almost forgotten about. Forbes Library, you can take instruments out, and they have a little resonator ukulele, almost like a dobro guitar, but a ukulele. And so I played that instead of, a standard guitar or even a standard ukulele. And even though it's not like prominent, it still has that Eastern European thing going on.
Yeah.
You're listening to an interview with Dave Stern, lead singer and guitarist for The Usual.
I know you, so The Usual released 2 new songs in December, the Jesus Wrote a Christmas Song and Between the Road and Sky. What is it like creating and releasing music during the pandemic?
Oh, it sucks in a lot of ways because we can't play together.
Right.
And to me, as a songwriter, you definitely spend a lot of time alone creating, and I think that's necessary. But then, like I said, like in the Dracula song, that ended up someplace very different from when I wrote it, and that's because I was able to interact with other musicians. And Doug and I, Mark unfortunately doesn't have a remote setup, so we can't really go back and forth between all 3 of us. Doug and I have that set up, but it's not the same. Playing to a click track, it's like
not at all.
I know, and there's a lot of great music that gets made with a click track, and sometimes you do need that, but it's just not the same. It's all good.
Yeah. So I was wondering. I know you started your music career in the Hartford, Connecticut, that area, before you moved to Western Mass. Could you tell me a little bit?
It was New York. I was in
New York
City.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in New York for 20 years in many bands that had, many near misses.
Yeah.
It was a great time in a lot of ways. And I played with some amazing musicians there. The first gig I ever played was at CBGB's back in whatever it was, 1980 or 81. I can't remember. And we got to record at A&R Studios before that got torn down, and that's where Steely Dan and Billy Joel made all these amazing records. It's just like we got to be in the middle of that scene, that downtown New York scene. I think we were after it, by a few years, by 3 or 4 years. But it was still, there was a lot going on in New York back then. I was in one band that we had, let's see, Stephen King again, full circle. Stephen King had just come out with this book called Christine, and the other guy and the songwriter in the band, my friend Mike, wrote a song, and through a friend in book publishing, which is where I worked for part of that time, we got the song to Stephen King. He loved it. He gave us money to go into a studio to, put it on the soundtrack, but they ended up not using it on the soundtrack,
That's really nice. Cool.
That was cool. And then I was in another band that we were, I don't even know if Musician Magazine is still around, but they used to have, God, is that still around? I just thought of that. I don't know. but they used to have this best unsigned band contest, and we got some honorable mention one year, and I don't know, it's been an interesting ride.
Cool. And I was wondering, how and when did The Usual become a band, and how long have you guys been playing together?
Well, yeah, that's so. Actually, I think Doug Plavin is the drummer, and he was one of the very first musicians I met here back when I moved here in 1998 or 99. And Mark and I were in a band together, I think, shortly thereafter. I think, maybe 2 years ago. What is this? 2021?
I know, I can't keep track anymore either.
I think about a couple years ago, Doug and I were like, yeah, let's just get together and jam. And Doug said, let's call Mark. And so we called Mark, and the three of us got together, and we just like, for me, playing with those guys, it just sparked a whole bunch of new songs that we started recording, and then the pandemic happened, and we have all this stuff that's like started, and that we want to work on, but it's really hard to work remotely. It's not at all collaborative. I mean, it's collaborative, if we send stuff back and forth, but you know what I mean. You're a musician.
Totally understand that. Well, those are all of the questions I have for you. Thank you today. This was great.
Sounds good, Mckenna. Thanks.
All right. Take care, Dave. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
You just heard an interview with Western New England musician Dave Stern, the lead singer and guitarist of The Usual. This is Mckenna Canty signing off for the New Music Alliance, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping the careers of Western New England artists who write original music.